The Last Supper. This piece was done, I think, in 1976. I was living on the Avenue Parmentier in Paris, sharing space with Alain Charles Croganac, my friend who eventually would be living in Algeria, in Morocco, and I would go down and visit with him. That's how we get the background of the Ores Mountains. And when I did it, I took Da Vinci's composition and used my doll period that I was in the middle of in putting the characters. And I didn't really read and see who was who. I knew that the center figure was Christ, but I didn't know who John was. I didn't know who Judas was. I didn't know, I didn't do that much research. I'm not a great researcher in books. And so I was waiting for the last person to come and pose for me for this figure here. And the person didn't show up. Models never show up on time if they show at all. So I used myself, and then I figured at the very end, I ended up being Judas, which is perfect. And I had done a lot of jewelry designs and making jewelry in Lebanon. And I threw some of the jewelry like here, and here, and here, and here, and some of my jewelry I used that and hung it on the people. There's a Jewish star on Christ's breast. There's a clock, a time bomb ticking in Shirley's head. She was a New York Jew, a wonderful etcher. She taught me a lot of techniques in etching. And these people, this is Juliana the Palestinian, this is a Malaysian, this is a Breton, this is a Frenchman, an American, myself. This is Viscount Philidor, who introduced me to Dali, Naman Salman from Baghdad, and Nikos from Greece. So these are my friends, group of friends getting together, which was, if one has lived in Lebanon like I have and visited a lot in North Africa and know the Muslim world pretty well, you realize that it's a man's culture. The men don't hang with women. They didn't then. They go in the cafes together, they go hand in hand around, they have friendships, intimate friendships with each other, and it's a masculine culture like the Greeks. It hadn't changed. It had not changed in the 70s anyway. So one can understand why Christ had 12 masculine disciples. That was the culture. And who were they? They were friends. They loved each other. And I wanted to do it as it really was. So you might see different symbols. I've got things hidden all throughout it. And I did throw in Juliana and Shirley for the two women. And of course the two women in a Christian piece would be Magdalena, which was certainly Juliana, and Shirley, who was certainly the Virgin. And I used my little pewter goblets. And my version of, if somebody says, what do you know about Christ? I say, well, he did suicide. And people say, suicide? I said, yeah. He knew that he was talking too much. He knew that if he kept talking, they were going to do something to him. And, crucifixions were common as the flu, common as cold. And so, of course, he knew that if he kept talking, that he would be crucified. Like today, if you drink and get in a car and drive too fast, you're going to get a DUI. Well, he knew that, so it was suicide. So I slit his wrist. I had him slit his wrist and fill up the cups with Christ's blood. I mean, why add alcoholism, why add pain to the agony of a crucifixion? Why make them all alcoholics as well as just human beings that maybe loved too much and wanted to straighten up the power of the spiritual groups that had the power, that were misusing it and misrepresenting spirituality. So he did suicide, to me. I never met Christ. I've heard a lot of stories, I've read the Bible, but I didn't know him personally. I feel like I know him through the stories and what I feel in my own experience of life that are right and wrong. And I think that he was certainly a radical. But as I was in the middle of my doll period, and I used doll bodies for a lot of these people, I made Christ a doll, because there is this saying that appears somewhere, is that God made man in the image of God, or something like that. To me, it's man made God in the image of man. And a doll was made by man in the image of man. So whatever is the real catchphrase that was written somewhere, I've kind of threw it in as my version, and man made God in the image of man, because we, with our huge, enormous egos, have made Earth the center of the universe, when in fact we're a particle of dust floating in this vast sea of our solar system, of our universe. And how many universes are there out there? But to us, in our egos, we're the center. So Christ gets the credit for being in the center of this communal portrait. The rest is myth or history. I did it in 4 panels, and in the original piece there are 4 blank panels up, because we don't really know what heaven is. The clean space. This could have been, who was the artist during the 70s who was doing just whole compositions of white or blue canvases next to each other with nothing on them? I forget his name. I forget these commas in art history. So that's more or less the Last Supper. And I would take hair off of each person and glue it onto their portraits, because in some worlds of the occult and spirituality, if you have a hair of the person, you own the person. They're in your power. And so I wanted this piece to be very powerful. And I explained to all of my models, I said, if I cut this hair and put it in the picture, whoever's got this painting has pretty much got you in their power. And they can zap you. Now, whether this is another myth, but to some spiritual people, some magicians, witches, they would call them way back, and they'd be burned at the stake. But now that we've advanced a little bit more to know that astrology is real, that the signs of the sun were created with wisdom, and it's a science rather than a myth, and that we live our calendar today on the 12 signs. We have the 4 seasons. We have everything has been around a long, long time before we got here, questioning it with our limited knowledge. So this is my Last Supper.